In every city centre, in every country in the world, you will find coffee shops. Where English is the international language of choice, coffee is now the international drink. Coffee is everywhere. But is it possible to have too many coffee shops, but not enough choice? Seattle is a jewel in the Pacific Northwest. Historically rich in seafaring tradition, it is known today as the home of Microsoft, Real Networks, and Amazon. Though it is perhaps most famous for its rain. The locals say that because it rains so much, people drink a lot of coffee, and this city is the home of specialty coffee with the highest expectations of its average cup. And they love their local coffee shops.
Part of the reason why coffee is so popular here is because of the weather. During the summers, we have the most beautiful summers, and a lot of people get hooked to Seattle because of the summer. But, you know, it's known to be as a place that rains for about 90 days. And so it's not so much the rain, but the overcast, the gray, which it will slow you down. You have to, like, be athletic. You know, or you have to drink a lot of coffee, or both. Otherwise you start hermiting away and you just get tired and want to take naps.
One company is synonymous with gourmet coffee. It's a name you can now find literally everywhere. In 3 decades, Starbucks has moved from a single store in Seattle's Pike Place Market to being the world's biggest retail coffee company. Starbucks has plans to dominate the entire globe. Flamboyant founder Howard Schultz wants to quadruple the number of outlets in the next 5 years to 40,000 and describes the company as being in the business of filling people's souls.
The prospects for the coffee market remain very good. It's still one of the world's most popular beverages. It's a huge part of our culture now, and of course it's always been a part of the culture in Middle East and Arab countries.
Over the last 10 years, Starbucks' growth has been very impressive, something to 14,000, approximately 14,000 stores across the globe currently, adding 1,500 to 2,000 stores a year currently, and that rate seems to be accelerating into what now translates into opening 5 or 6 stores per day.
I do think it's going to be really interesting how an industry that has a very strong presence in USA and Europe, very strong brands marketing the coffee, develop that market in some of those traditional coffee consuming countries.
Seattle-based PR consultant Adam Martin has been a close observer of Starbucks' behavior over several years.
My experience working over there is one that there is a corporate culture there. Everyone's nice. I think they genuinely believe in what they're doing, and I've actually sort of worked on levels with some of the top guys up there, and I've actually heard them say, like, everyone in the world has a right to great coffee, and why should anyone be deprived that right? I think to some degree, and just my opinion, and my opinion sort of having worked with a lot of those guys, is that it's God's work. They're spreading good coffee, and I've sort of seen them talking about their work with what they're doing in China, and just my personal opinion, I haven't worked with them, is that I think they're not spreading coffee, they're spreading capitalism.
In 1968, 3 years before the first Starbucks opened, Jim Stewart started roasting coffee beans from the back of his ice cream parlor. Even before the beginning of the coffee boom in Seattle, Starbucks had a major rival on its home turf.
I sort of look at the specialty coffee business like the grandfathers as being Al Peet in San Francisco. And that was kind of the branch on the family tree where Starbucks got their training and their background. And the other was, Herb Hyman at the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf in Los Angeles. And his wife was Swedish, and he took more of a European, Northern European, light roast approach. Starbucks and Peet's were more dark roast. I don't actually know why that difference and why the two people did it that way, but it kind of resulted in then Seattle having 2 coffee companies growing up that did it completely different from each other. So it even added to the choices that people had. Starbucks and Seattle's Best Coffee were like the fathers of the specialty business, and I say that because Seattle is kind of the the home of specialty coffee in the U.S.
What was it about Seattle that actually gave Starbucks the grounding, the place to start? And it might be those very same features about the town that allowed a relaxed urban concept to grow, was probably why Starbucks is what it is today. But in some sense it's outgrown itself, and it's outgrown Seattle, and well, what do you expect?
They seem to think that they're the only coffee company in existence.
Like them or hate them, anyone that's had a coffee, I'm sure one of the past 3 coffees came from them.
They, for example, if they're invited to say a media tasting event, if it's not only Starbucks, they won't come and participate with others. It's like, we're just not part of the group. The fact that over the years we, never really spoke, even though we're right here in a pretty small town and in the same business and so on, I think is unusual. In terms of, interviews or just anything, they're very difficult to work with.
Starbucks' approach to the media is very much, we're doing business as usual. So we are there, we're delivering a service to our customers who choose to come in. We're not forcing anyone. And so I think their approach appears to be, well, what do we owe the media? Probably nothing.
But that hasn't stopped their business thriving. Starbucks has grown by 29% every year for the past decade to 2005. And yet the competition is still out there, and Seattle's coffee drinkers know it.
You're not gonna have like a lot of the local crowd going to like Starbucks. You're gonna come to Online Coffee, you're gonna go to get Cafe Vega, you're gonna go to, it's a local place, and it's like this. It's got artwork up, local artists more than likely, and you wanna support that. You wanna be a part of that because that's the community.
Despite strong support for its rivals, it seems Starbucks has got eliminating its competitors down to a fine art, though they shy away from taking them on face to face.
A promotion company in Seattle decided that somebody back in New York isn't going to tell us whose coffee is the best. We can have our own tasting and we'll just decide ourselves. So they organized this huge media event. All the coffee companies brought their coffees, and I think there were 7 or 8 categories, and we were selected as the best dessert coffee and the overall Seattle's best coffee. And every single news program on TV that night, said Seattle's best coffee. It has to have infuriated Starbucks. They would never participate in something like that. Still won't, I don't think.
In fact, Starbucks' response to Seattle's best coffee's growing success and the threat it posed wasn't to compete harder.
A mutual friend introduced Howard and I one day. The purpose of the meeting was to offer to buy us out. And, when I say that they don't fool around, it was 3 meetings. The introduction meeting, the exchange financial information meeting, and here's our offer, and it was take it or leave it. That's the other thing about Starbucks. They never overpay for anything. And the bigger they've gotten, the more that I would say has become true.
Jim Stewart turned down Starbucks' bid and grew the value of the company to $100 million. Then he sold it to Atlanta-based AFC. The new company was initially successful, but ran into financial difficulties and was soon forced to sell its prized asset.
Seattle's best coffee was beginning to work, especially out of the country. Japan, I think we'd opened up 142 franchise stores. And I guess it was their pressure and the fact that we were successful that made us the most saleable of the group. And to make a long story short, that's when Starbucks was able to buy it at, I would say, a very reasonable price.
The fact that Starbucks has continued to run and to retain the brand Seattle's best, I think makes for them good sense. So they've learned a lot about how communities work. I think they've learned of the damage that they would do by just wholesale bringing in Starbucks' big bully approach. They also, may view Seattle's best as a second brand to roll out worldwide.
Not everyone thinks that Starbucks are going to have it all their own way.
I do not think they're the best coffee. I'm kind of a believer in local, and sort of, the smaller guy, and not for the sake of just supporting the mom and pop, but usually it's better, and usually you know who you're giving your money to. And I'd much rather go to a little little shop, you know.
It will not work, it will not be accepted if it's simply about imposing this single business model on different parts of the world. Again, I think it's just a very big challenge for these companies that see themselves and act as global brands of how that really plays out in all these new regions that are opening up.